Dostlar, bilirsinizmi ki bir bank öz kazino tətbiqi bir play'i buraxıb və hazırda ilk depozit üçün bütün yeni oyunculara böyük bonuslar verir. Belə bir şansı qaçırmaq olmaz. Tətbiqi yükləyin və qaliblər siyahısında olun.
This is where you have to become a little bit of a detective. For example, this particular piece has 2 holes in it. So I know that matches up with that part there that has 2 holes. So go through the entire kit that you received and make sure everything is here, especially the hardware. Sometimes it's hard to tell all these pieces, so you just kind of have to look at how many of each piece there's supposed to be, and if nothing else, see if you have the right number of identical pieces. Be warned, when you're opening up the box, there's going to be little pieces of styrofoam everywhere. I've never had that not be the case. So I always have a little hand vac when I'm unpacking, and I have a damp cloth, not a wet cloth, a damp cloth, because this is fiberboard, and sometimes if it gets too wet, it could cause some problems. But I wipe them down and vacuum them off as I'm taking them out of the box, and I get that box out of the house as quickly as possible. That way it's just a cleaner build. So the first assembly calls for part A, B, and C. So it seems pretty straightforward. I know this is A because it has 2 holes. I know this is B because it is the piece that's long and rectangle. I can identify that piece with the scallop. That's pretty easy. The question is, does A go here, or does it go over here? You might think, well, it doesn't make a difference, but it does, because you see in the back there's a slot, and if we put this in wrong, everything's going to be backwards, and the instructions don't tell you where it should go. So what we have to do is go a few steps ahead, and what you can see in this picture is that we're sliding the back in place, which means the slot has to be below the plain rectangular piece, which is piece B. Since my slot is back here, piece B has to go there. It also doesn't tell you how it connects. This is where putting projects together like this, after a while you get used to the hardware. So what we're going to do is screw this into the flat piece, the base, and then this piece goes into that right there. And when they go together, that fits in. You give this a turn with the screwdriver and it'll tighten them down. There was a little piece of plastic there, and you want to take that off, cut it away or pick it away, because you want to make sure that this lies flat. So on that piece, you're going to see an arrow. Let me take it out, if I can get it out now. But that can spin around and round. Okay? And you want to make sure that the little arrow that's on there is pointing down. Otherwise, that hole won't line up. So you put that on like that, and then we give that a turn, and now that's tight. That's all there is to it. Very common fastening device that you're going to find when you put these types of projects together. I'm going to do that same thing on this piece right here. Put that in with the arrow pointing down. You probably can't see that, but the arrow is pointing down, little arrow on there. And then put that on. Now tighten it up. So this piece is done. This wiggles a little bit, but I'm not worried about it, because when we screw the sides on, that will tighten it up. Now the next instruction says I'm supposed to put this end on here and screw it into the top, the middle shelf, and the bottom. There's 2 pieces that look almost alike. Which one do I put there? Well, I know this is wrong, because this has a groove and that has a groove, and they aren't lining up. So if I put that in, and you can see those grooves line up, so that's going to be, when the back piece slides in, it'll notch in very cleanly there. So I'm going to line up the other 2 pieces, and then we'll put screws in from the far end. Now I like to put all the screws in very loosely before I tighten everything down to make sure it's all lined up. So I'm going to put these screws in first to get that top shelf lined up. And then I'm going to line up the second shelf. Okay, so I have all of those screws started. I'll tighten those up, and then we're going to move down to this end. One step at a time. You have to make sure everything fits. I think that's a pretty important pointer. These pieces, although they're cheaply made, they can look really good and be really strong if you take your time putting them together. Sometimes the holes don't line up perfectly, so always loose fit them and slowly go around the whole thing. I have 5 screws, or 4 screws there. So I'm not going to tighten one down and then tighten the next 3. I'm going to move around them in a pattern, tightening, 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 maybe adjust a little bit, move it so it's lined up just the way I wanted. Then I tighten it down, and you'll be really happy with the results. Also, be very careful. These are really coarse threads, and the fiberboard these are made out of can be stripped very easily. Be careful how tight you make this. Make it so it's snug and no tighter. If it's wobbly, tighten a little bit, but don't go overboard, or you could strip out the hole that this is made out of. And then there's solutions, but it's going to be kind of tricky to solve that problem. All right, now I'm going to put the bottom shelf in. Be careful, because once again, there's a slot. We want to make sure that that lines up with that slot. So when we put the back in, it fits. I could flip this whole thing over, and the slot would be on this front edge, and that would not work at all. All right, here's something really weird. The instructions clearly show that the center shelf should be in place when that end is being assembled. And yet it doesn't have to. Not only that, it can't, because there are no holes here. This is an adjustable shelf, and it's used with